In 2007, a woman drank 2 gallons of water in 3 hours trying to win a Nintendo Wii. It killed her. Her own cells did it, using nothing more dangerous than pure water. Let's begin. Tap water is not clean. It's full of stuff. Calcium, magnesium, sodium, trace amounts of whatever your local pipes have been quietly leaching into it for decades. Almost none of that is dangerous. Most of it your body actually uses. Now take all of that out. Every ion, every mineral, every trace of anything that isn't 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. Run tap water through a chamber of electrically charged resin beads and it strips every dissolved particle out one at a time until what's left has a name that sounds like marketing: ultra-pure water. Semiconductor factories use it to rinse microchips, because a single stray mineral ion can ruin a chip worth more than your car. Hospitals use it in dialysis machines, tested under an international purity standard, ISO 23500, that treats the water almost like a controlled drug. Laboratories grade it by resistivity, a measure of how badly the water wants to conduct electricity, which is really a measure of how little is left dissolved in it to conduct with. Biologically, once you drink it, that's close to what ultra-pure water becomes. The moment it enters your body, it stops being neutral. It's a problem your cells now have to solve, and they only have one tool available to solve it with. Osmosis is simple mechanics. Water moves from where it's relatively diluted to where it's relatively concentrated with dissolved stuff, always, because that's just what water does through a membrane built to let it pass. Every cell in your body is a small bag of salty fluid, sealed behind a membrane that lets water through, while holding most of the salts and minerals inside. Under normal conditions, the fluid outside your cells and the fluid inside stay roughly balanced. Nobody's moving, nothing's swelling. Flood the outside of those cells with water that has 0 dissolved anything in it, and the balance breaks immediately. The fluid outside is now far more diluted than the fluid inside, and osmosis pulls water across that membrane, trying to even the gradient out. Your cells absorb water. They keep absorbing it, because under ordinary biology, this scale of imbalance was never supposed to happen, and there's no mechanism built to shut the process off partway through. A cell membrane isn't elastic. It's a fixed structure with a load limit. Push enough water across it and the cell doesn't stretch to accommodate the extra volume. It ruptures. Do that to millions of cells at once, and the ones that matter most sit inside your skull, a container with exactly 0 spare room. Your blood sodium concentration crashes, a condition doctors call hyponatremia, and your brain starts to swell against bone that cannot expand. Symptoms move fast: confusion, headache, nausea, then twitching, seizures, and in severe cases, coma. Doctors call the end result cerebral edema. In plain terms, your skull runs out of room before your brain runs out of swelling. Every hospital pharmacy stocks a fluid called sterile water for injection. It's exactly what it sounds like: water, purified and sterilized, sitting on a shelf next to saline bags and syringes. Its packaging carries a specific printed warning: not for direct infusion. That label exists because segment 2's mechanism doesn't stay theoretical once you apply it to blood. Injected straight into a vein, pure water hits your red blood cells with the exact same hypotonic imbalance ultra-pure water creates in every other cell in your body. Except red blood cells have no walls to speak of, no rigid structure holding their shape. They swell, and they burst in seconds rather than hours. Doctors call this hemolysis. That's why the fluid a nurse actually infuses into your vein is saline, water with sodium chloride dissolved into it at close to the same concentration as your own blood plasma. Pure water only gets used as a diluent, mixed into another drug before administration, never delivered directly. A pharmacy technician who pushed sterile water straight into a patient's bloodstream would be committing a serious medical error, one severe enough to trigger kidney failure. The purest water on a hospital shelf is also the one substance on that shelf a nurse is trained never to hand you directly. January 2007. A radio station in Sacramento launches a promotion. The name tells you everything about how much thought went into it. Hold your Wii for a Wii. Drink as much water as you can. Don't use the bathroom. Whoever holds out longest wins a game console. 18 people sign up. Jennifer Strange, a 28-year-old mother of 3, is one of them. Contestants start with small half-pint bottles every 15 minutes. The bottles get bigger from there. Over roughly 3 hours, Strange drinks close to 2 gallons. On air, she tells the DJs her head is hurting badly. One of them jokes that she looks pregnant. She doesn't win. She comes second and goes home with concert tickets instead of a Wii. Hours later, she calls a coworker, says her head is hurting, that she's on her way home. That's the last anyone hears from her. She's found dead in her house that same day. Cause of death, water intoxication. Acute hyponatremia, the exact mechanism from segment 2, at a scale her kidneys physically could not clear. Healthy kidneys can process roughly 1 to 1.5 liters of water an hour. Strange had taken in far more than that, far faster than any human body is built to filter. A jury later found the radio station's parent company liable and awarded her family $16.5 million. 10 employees lost their jobs. None of that changes the mechanism. Her body did exactly what any human body does when it's handed more pure water than it can process, using the one substance in that studio nobody thought to be afraid of, which is the actual joke here, if you can call it one. Nobody in that room was watching the water, it was the safest looking thing in the building. Humans aren't the only ones this happens to. Ask anyone who keeps an aquarium what happens if you fill a tank straight from a jug of distilled water. The answer, repeated across basically every fish-keeping forum online, is one word: don't. A fish's body runs on the same principle yours does. It needs a certain concentration of salts in the water around it to keep its internal chemistry stable. Drop a fish into water with 0 dissolved minerals, and its body starts leaking its own salts outward into the tank, trying to equalize a gradient it never signed up for. Its nervous system and immune system take the damage first. Multiple fish-keeping guides use the same word for the outcome: fatal. This is why aquarium suppliers sell remineralizing drops, small bottles whose entire job is adding back exactly what deionization stripped out. You're not making the water dirtier, you're making it survivable for a fish, the same way saline makes pure water survivable for a person on a completely different scale. Same mechanism, same direction, different animal entirely. Osmosis doesn't check what species it's dealing with before it starts moving water across a membrane. So where's the real line? Turns out it has less to do with total volume and more to do with speed, relative to what your kidneys can clear. A study of runners in the 2002 Boston Marathon measured blood sodium in almost 500 participants right after they crossed the finish line. 13% had hyponatremia, just over 0.5% had it at a critical level, low enough to be dangerous. One runner that year, Cynthia Lucero, 28 years old, collapsed during the race and died 2 days later. Cause of death? Hyponatremic encephalopathy, the same brain swelling mechanism from segment 2, delivered by sports drinks and plain water instead of a stopwatch and a game console. A separate documented case involves an army trainee whose fatal water intoxication was first mistaken for heat exhaustion, the opposite diagnosis, treated by giving him more fluids instead of fewer. Marathon runners are told constantly to hydrate, and that advice isn't wrong on its own. The failure point is when hydrating quietly turns into drinking as much fluid as physically possible. Without replacing the sodium, the body is also losing through sweat. Pure water taken in fast enough doesn't top up what you've lost, it dilutes what you have left. That's why sports drinks contain electrolytes, why marathon medical tents check blood sodium instead of just asking how tired you look, and why standard advice for endurance athletes has shifted over the last 20 years, from drink as much as you can toward drink to thirst. Your body was already telling people the right amount. For a long time, almost nobody was listening to it. So, water, the single most harmless looking substance on the planet, sitting in bottles, taps, and IV bags, doing absolutely nothing until you give it a gradient to work with. Doesn't need to be contaminated. It doesn't need to be dangerous on its own. It just needs your body's own chemistry to hand it a job to do. And it will do that job with zero regard for whether you meant to give it one, which might be the least comforting thing you'll learn about a glass of water all year.